Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. President Trump reportedly holding a situation room meeting yesterday as he weighs whether or not to extend the ceasefire with Iran.
Meanwhile, we're tracking traffic in the Straits of Hormuz this morning as Tehran claims it's regained control of the key shipping route.
We head back out to Israel where Trey Yingst has the latest. Good morning, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. The ceasefire between the United States and Iran is set to end in less than 72 hours, and the Iranians are already testing the agreement. Over the weekend, 2 vessels were trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz and reported gunfire toward their ships. We know other vessels were able to pass, but the Iranians say the strait is closed once again and in their control.
If traffic is still taking place in the Strait today and is proceeding, we control the Strait. Now, for 2 or 3 days, the U.S. has deliberately laid siege. What does siege mean? It means that everyone comes and goes, but Iran doesn't go. What a foolish and ignorant decision.
The U.S. blockade of Iranian ports remains in effect. CENTCOM said that 23 vessels complied with their warnings to turn around on Saturday. Additional vessels were forced to turn around today. President Trump spoke from the Oval Office over the weekend about the situation in the Strait.
They got a little cute, as they have been doing for 47 years. Nobody ever took them on. We took them on. They have no Navy. They have no Air Force. They have no leaders. They have no nothing. Actually, their leaders are, it is regime change.
The Iranians continue to threaten U.S. forces in the region, but while the Iranians are talking, the Americans are preparing, sending dozens of additional transport planes to the Middle East over the weekend.
The upper hand is with our forces. We hold the advantage. We have not struck many of the targets. In other words, we have left some more important matters for later stages. And if matters return to war again, we hold the upper hand. We can stop oil production. We can shut down 15 million barrels of oil a day and keep it suspended for an entire year. We did not want to create major disruption in the world, so we showed patience and acted with restraint.
The reality is the United States holds the upper hand, the world's most powerful military, and President Trump has a variety of options to respond to the Iranians. Guys?
Hey, Trey, it's Lucas. 2 of these ships that came under fire in the Strait of Hormuz were from India. They were delivering, one of them, 2 million barrels of crude. Why do you think Iran decided to attack an Indian vessel?
It's a great question. We don't know specifically why these vessels were targeted and others that passed through the strait weren't. But the reality is the Iranians are effectively closing that part of the Strait of Hormuz because many ships are not going to be able to get the insurance or ability to travel through this area, despite the fact that if you go further on, you reach the U.S. blockade against Iranian ports. But the situation here shows how disconnected the Iranians are in their position. You had Iran's foreign minister late last week saying the Strait of Hormuz was open, only hours later to be rebuffed by his own government and top IRGC officials saying the strait was closed. This speaks to the ability of the negotiators. And if Iran's foreign minister isn't able to ensure that the Strait of Hormuz is open, he's not going to be able to ensure that enriched uranium within Iran is able to be removed as a part of any sort of agreement that is reached with the United States. And again, the Iranians are directly speaking against the terms that President Trump said were already agreed to. And again, this is the Iranians calling the president's bluff. But we know President Trump is not bluffing. He wasn't bluffing before Operation Epic Fury began, and he's not bluffing now. The Iranians do not have the cards. They lack leverage at the negotiating table, and they're trying to do these small acts in the region to show that they still have some strength left. But it's a very dangerous game because, again, as the Iranians are talking, the Americans are preparing. And there's a real possibility that in the days ahead, this region returns to war if the Iranians are unwilling to make a good faith agreement.
So, Trey, with the confusion within the Iranian officials, and you see there the parliament speaker Gallup putting out strong rhetoric, will we see resolution about whether or not the strait is open or not between now and Tuesday when that ceasefire is expected to end?
Yeah, the coming days are going to be critical because it's not just the Strait of Hormuz, it's also this issue of highly enriched uranium. The Iranians have admitted they have enough highly enriched uranium to to create 11 nuclear bombs. And President Trump has been very clear. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, despite what they say on these propaganda channels and despite the threats that they make against President Trump and American forces in the region. The Iranians, again, lack leverage, and so they can make these statements, they can fire on vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, but they're either going to do this the easy way or the hard way. And the United States military now has more than 50,000 forces in the region. Each and every day, there are dozens of transport planes arriving in the Middle East. And this is an indication that President Trump has a variety of options on the table. The president has been very gracious to the Iranians, offering them an off-ramp, an olive branch, to avoid going back to a direct confrontation with the United States of America. But there's a difference here, and this is very important to note. Each and every day throughout Operation Epic Fury, the Iranians got weaker. Their missile production lines were targeted. The capability to launch missiles was targeted. And a variety of their drone operations were struck in U.S. and Israeli strikes. The leadership of the Iranian regime was decimated by U.S. and Israeli strikes during this operation. And so while the Iranians are getting weaker, the Americans are getting stronger. And again, it just speaks to the reality on the ground. The Iranians can threaten U.S. forces in the region. They can be unwilling to make a good faith deal, but they're going to pay a heavy price. Remember, President Trump did not target the power plants and the bridges in Iran. He has promised to do so if the war resumes. And it really raises the question of calculation for the Iranians. Are they really willing to go back to war? Because at the end of the day, the United States will get the enriched uranium. They will open the Strait of Hormuz. And the question is whether or not these things are going to be addressed at the negotiating table or on the battlefield.
You know, Trey, we've been told this whole time, starting with Operation Midnight Hammer, that the Iranians just operate differently, right? That this is existential to them, that they are not afraid to be martyred or die for their cause. So that does change the calculation, right? I mean, you're right. As you lay it out, it looks like, you know, President Trump has opened up a lot more options for himself. It's true, I believe, in my heart, that he wants peace and he's trying to give them opportunities to come to the table. But if you're dealing with someone that our government has said is willing to die for this cause, and they see this as existential, I mean, what happens to them? They're done for, right? So now what? I mean, is this the most dangerous moment that we've had yet in this war? Are we looking at World War III, I guess is what I'm saying.
Let's get right to it.
Look, President Trump is willing to escalate in order to de-escalate, and he has done that very successfully over the past several weeks. You remember that post on Truth Social where the Iranians were fearful because the president has a variety of options and weapons to use against the regime. They clearly have not read The Art of the Deal. This is a president who is used to making deals, and he is willing to go to extremes in order to get exactly what he wants. And he's also been very clear he's not willing to accept 90% or 95% of what the United States wants at the negotiating table. He wants everything, and he wants it now. And if the Iranians are unwilling to make that deal, this war is going to resume. And in the past, the Iranians have used a very similar playbook. They try to extend these negotiations and continue talks in order to get what they want. This is a president who is not willing to let that happen. He saw the mistakes that President Obama made and that previous administrations made when it came to dealing with the Iranian regime. And the president is not making those mistakes because he understood the existential threat that the regime posed. This is a regime that had the ability to reach into Europe with intercontinental ballistic missiles. This is a program that we saw in action during Operation Epic Fury. They were launching ballistic missiles not just toward Israel and Gulf countries, but toward a NATO ally, toward Turkey, a member of NATO. And ultimately, this showed that they have the medium-range capabilities to launch ballistic missiles at major population centers. At the same time, they were developing a nuclear program very close to a nuclear bomb, enriching uranium at 60%, just one step away from 90%, which is weapons-grade material. And when you combine those two programs, you are looking at a regime that is unpredictable and then would have the ability to fire nuclear weapons toward U.S. allies and forces in the Middle East and beyond. And that is exactly what President Trump wanted to avoid. It is the reason that Operation Epic Fury began. And despite what you often hear on Capitol Hill or from Democrats talking about what the president is doing as it relates to the Iranian regime, this is a president who wanted to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon.
A crucial moment indeed. Great reporting. Trey Yingst live for us in Tel Aviv. Trey, we'll come back to you throughout the morning. Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.